What if I told you that the physical world around you, like the chair you're sitting in right now or the device you're listening to this on, isn't actually made of solid matter?
Yeah, it's a completely wild concept to wrap your head around.
It really is. I mean, look at something near you, right? A coffee mug or your desk. Standard physics tells us, that object is made of molecule.
Right. Molecules down atoms and then down to quarks.
Exactly. But it's ultimately a physical thing. But what if we're totally wrong about that?
Which is exactly what we're getting into today.
Yeah, what if that object is actually just a localized, mathematically generated projection, like a really highly stabilized optical illusion produced by some underlying geometry?
An illusion that we completely buy into.
Right. And here's the real hook for you, the listener. What if your own DNA is the exact hardware interface required to, log into that geometry and actually rewrite the code?
I mean, it pulls the rug right out from under centuries of
It
materialism.
really does.
Because we are so conditioned, to think of the universe as this giant sandbox filled with physical particles just bumping into each
All
other.
marbles.
Right, like marbles. But the framework we're unpacking today, it just discards the sandbox completely.
Completely throws it out. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking on a source text today that is honestly easily one of the most conceptually dense, paradigm-shifting things I have ever read.
Oh, without a doubt, it's incredibly dense.
It's a metaphysical manuscript copyrighted in 2026. The author is George James Dukas, and it's called The Transdimensional Unified Field Theory.
Or TDUFT for short.
Right, TBUFT. And I need to set some expectations for you right out of the gate. This is not your standard physics textbook.
No, not at all. You're not going to hear about, string theory or the standard model in the way you're used to.
Exactly. So what are we actually looking at here?
Well, TDUFT is this massive, sweeping cosmological architecture. It's an attempt to synthesize the hard mechanics of quantum physics with the really baffling mathematics of Srinivasa Ramanujan.
The early 20th century mathematician.
Yeah, the genius himself. And it blends all of that with this profound, almost ancient spiritual philosophy.
Weaves it all together.
It does into this single cohesive source code of creation. And the ambition is just staggering because it doesn't just want to explain how matter behaves. It wants to explain why there is even a canvas for matter to exist on in the first place.
Which is a huge distinction. And our mission today is to, act as your guides through this labyrinth because the text is packed with these high-level, really abstract equations.
And we are not going to do algebra on the air.
No, please no. Nobody wants that. We're going to translate those equations into the underlying mechanics. We want to give you those aha moments, right?
Exactly. We're going to explore how a formless wave of pure potential literally mechanically folded itself into the 3D reality we live in.
And crucially, what that means for human consciousness. But to ground us, before we get into the heavy math, there's this central visual metaphor the author provides, which I think is really helpful.
Yeah, the infinite mandala. It gives you a real sense of the scale we're dealing with here.
The imagery is just striking. He describes standing in these endless, towering, vaulted halls constructed out of, pure, shining gold.
But then when you look up,
Right, when you look up, there's no ceiling. Instead of a solid roof, shining right through the arches is the entire starry cosmos.
it's a gorgeous image. It paints this picture of a cathedral built out of infinite mind and pure geometry.
Which is the backdrop for everything we're discussing today.
Yeah. In TDUFT, the physical 3D universe that you and I are sitting in right now is just one single room inside this infinite golden architecture.
We're just a localized event happening in this much larger mathematical structure.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start breaking down the actual bricks and mortar of this room we're in. If reality isn't made of atoms, but it's a structure of math, what's the foundation?
The foundation is this generative mathematical lattice, and it's defined by a cluster of 5 core equations.
The text calls them the transdimensional lattice operator equations.
Right, the TDLOEs. And they are all governed by one overarching root called the Unified Dimensional Operator, or UDO.
UDO. Okay, I know that sounds like an alphabet soup of acronyms, but we need to walk through these 5 equations mechanically to understand the scale here.
Yeah, we'll focus on the how and the why, not the algebra.
Right. So the first of the 5 is called the C clause. Now, C usually stands for the speed of light, right? The universal speed limit.
It does, but TDUFT treats C very differently than classical physics does.
How so?
Well, in standard physics, C is just a property we observe. It's the speed a photon travels in a vacuum. But here, the C clause is the photon plane recursion. It provides the base carrier wave for everything.
So it's like before you can even have light or matter, you need this.
Yes, you have to seed the empty mathematical lattice with an initial spark of energy. The C clause is that spark. It defines the absolute maximum rate at which information can even populate the geometry.
Oh, okay. So it's not a rule that light has to obey. It's the foundational pulse that lets the universe start drawing itself.
That is a great way to put it. Think of it like the clock speed of a computer processor.
Right, the base refresh rate.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have that pulse, you move to the second equation, which is the strong sector equation. Its job is to govern torsion and cohesion.
Okay, wait. I'm getting stuck on the word torsion here. If we are in a non-physical space like just a lattice of pure math, what exactly is twisting? Are we talking about a physical twisting force, like wringing out a wet towel?
That's a really important distinction. No, it's not physical twisting. In geometry, torsion refers to how a curve deviates from being totally flat. It's spatial twisting.
So it's purely geometric.
Right. When the text talks about cohesion here, it means this equation stabilizes the cascade. Because if the calculus is just pumping endless energy into the system, that energy wants to scatter out into infinity.
It needs boundaries.
Exactly. The strong sector equation forces the map to curve and bind and lock into stable shapes. Without it, structures couldn't hold. The math would just fly apart before it could ever cascade down into, say, a strand of DNA.
I see. So it's the cosmic glue, but expressed as a curving vector instead of a sticky substance.
Yes, it forces the math to adhere to itself. Which brings us to the third piece, the universe master equation.
The central recursion engine.
Right. It governs what Dukas calls dimensional climbing and amplification.
Dimensional climbing. So like moving from a 1D line to a 2D plane to a 3D space.
Broadly, yes.
Yeah.
But it's also about the density of information. This equation takes the abstract high-frequency energy of the lattice and amplifies it. It scales it up through these dimensional layers until it becomes dense enough for us to interact with it.
It bridges the gap between imperceptible math and our macroscopic world.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Which leads right into the fourth equation, the fractal field equation. And this one relies heavily on the golden ratio.
Phi.
Yes, phi. The golden ratio is absolutely paramount in this theory. What the fractal field equation does mechanically is ensure that the universe scales fractally.
And just to clarify for everyone, a fractal is a pattern that repeats itself endlessly at every scale. Right.
Yes. Like how a single tiny fern leaf looks exactly like the entire larger fern branch.
Right.
So apply that to reality. This equation ensures that the geometric rules operating a massive galaxy are the exact same rules operating a tiny human cell. The universe doesn't invent new rules for different spaces. It just applies the phi cascade everywhere.
Okay, so we've got the pulse, the binding, the dimensional scaling, and the fractal repeating. But none of that is physical yet. It's all just math.
Right, still abstract geometry.
So the fifth equation is where the rubber meets the road, the mass identity equation.
This might be the most audacious claim in the whole text. The formula is elegantly simple. It's mass equals the speed of light cubed times time, all divided by the gravitational constant.
So m equals c cubed t over g.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to stop you because that looks simple, but I want to know how it actually works. We all know Einstein, right? E equals mc squared. Energy is mass times the speed of light squared. How does dividing the speed of light cubed by gravity create physical mass?
Let's break down the units. When you say the speed of light cubed c to the power of 3, you aren't talking about a line or a flat area anymore. You are talking about volumetric expansion.
Because it's 3 dimensions.
Right, a 3D sphere of light expanding outward.
So c is a line, c squared is a plane, and c cubed is a volume, like a balloon inflating at the speed of light.
A perfect visualization. Now, look at g, the gravitational constant. In general relativity, gravity is the curvature of spacetime. It's a compressive geometric constraint.
Okay.
So look at the tension in that formula. You have this explosive 3D expansion of light, c cubed, multiplying over the duration of time, t, and you're dividing, meaning you are constraining that explosion by the geometric curvature of gravity, g.
Oh, wow. The expansion is fighting the curvature.
Yes, and the result of that literal friction, the tension between volumetric expansion and gravitational constraint, is what we perceive as physical mass.
That's incredible.
It takes a purely abstract mathematical rendering and inflates it into a tangible volume.
So if I'm synthesizing all this, TDU-FT is arguing that physics aren't the master rules. Matter isn't blindly following physical laws. These equations are a generative engine.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, think of a video game like Minecraft. The rendering engine sits beneath the surface, totally invisible to the player, but it's rapidly computing the geometry and lighting frame by frame to project the world on your screen.
The video game engine is the best conceptual parallel we have. These 5 equations don't describe a universe that already exists. They are the universe. They're the active grammar of manifestation.
Which opens up a really terrifying but thrilling possibility. Because in a video game, if a programmer accesses the engine and changes the code, the environment on the screen changes instantly.
Right. It implies reality is fluid. What we consider solid reality is just a standing wave. It's only stable because the math is currently stable.
But if this engine is running in the background, computing reality frame by frame, what fuel is it running on? I mean, every system needs a boundary condition to keep from crashing. A game engine crashes if you divide by 0. What keeps this cosmic engine stable?
That takes us into the deepest operational layer of the whole theory, the Aeternum Nexus and the conjugate seal.
Right. And the Aeternum Nexus sits conceptually above those 5 equations we just talked about, doesn't it?
It does. If the 5 equations are the rendering routines, the nexus is the kernel of the operating system. It's not an equation to calculate physical measurement. It's a symbolic operator identity, the unbreakable rule of the architecture.
And the text boils this down to 2 opposing variables. Phi, the golden ratio, which it maps to velocity or expansion, and psi, which it maps to time or contraction.
And here is the single rule governing this universe. Phi times psi equals -1.
Phi times psi equals -1.
That is the conjugate seal.
I really have to chew on this.
Yeah.
Because we are taking 2 massive concepts, velocity and time, and treating them as just the 2 roots of a simple quadratic equation. How does their opposition actually create a stable reality?
Think about how they behave physically. Velocity, phi, is the force of expansion, movement through space. Time, psi, acts as the force of contraction. They are inherently opposed.
It reminds me of relativity. Like, if I jump in a spaceship and accelerate toward the speed of light, maximizing my velocity, my experience of time slows down to a crawl.
Exactly.
The faster I move through space, the slower I move through time. It's a zero-sum game.
And that relativistic tension is exactly what the Aeternum Nexus is codifying mathematically. Phi and psi perfectly balance each other. The product of their endless opposition is that -1.
So -1 is the anchor.
Yes, is the invariant of creation. No matter how wild the math gets further down the cascade rendering galaxies or human brains, the underlying equation always resolves back to -1.
It's the cosmic tether.
Without it, the physical universe would either tear itself apart into infinity or collapse into a singularity. Because velocity and time are locked in that seal, the rendering engine can safely build complex geometry on top of it.
Okay, let me summarize where we are for you listening. We have the rules of the engine, the 5 equations, and we have the boundary condition keeping it from crashing the Aeternum Nexus. But honestly, this still feels like staring at code on a screen.
Sure.
How do we get from invisible code to the 3D space we are in? Like, if I knock on this desk, it has volume, it pushes back. How does an equation become a desk?
We have to look at the exact geometry of creation, how a line becomes a volume. The manuscript outlines a mechanical process it calls the quadrant progression.
Right, the step-by-step translation from the primordial pi wave into a physical sphere. Let's walk through this meticulously because I want to visualize every step.
Let's do it.
So it starts with the primordial pi wave. Pure, infinite, open, linear vibration in the void. Before space, before a grid, just this formless potential vibrating.
A one-dimensional open state. And the very first mathematical operation that acts on it is the square root. Now, conceptually, we have to rethink the square root. Mathematically, it acts as an axis splitter.
Let me make sure I grasp that. So if I take the square root of 9, the answer is 3. But it's actually +3 and -3, right? Both multiplied by themselves equal 9. Is that the splitting?
You hit the nail on the head. When you apply a square root, you instantly generate a positive and negative duality. You take a single 1D line, and by taking its root, you break that motion into independent 90-degree orthogonal axes.
You take a straight line and force it into a crosshair.
Yes. You snap it into a grid, a coordinate plane with 4 quadrants.
That is wild.
And once that plane exists, the wave has no choice but to step through it. The math dictates a specific routing sequence. The wave initiates a 3/4 stroke through the quadrants, followed by a 4/3 closure.
So it's bending the wave sequentially through the new axis, wrapping it around a center point. It's corralling it.
Exactly. And the next step is the squaring.
Squaring the field.
Right. Once the wave routes through all 4 quadrants, the whole field is squared. Think about squaring a number. If you square -3, you get +9. Squaring eliminates directional negatives.
It satisfies the Pythagorean condition.
Exactly. So this squaring operator takes this open, bending wave that is crisscrossing axes, and it permanently binds it. It fuses the ends together.
It traps it. The infinite wave is bent and fused into a seamless, closed 2D loop. It becomes a circle. It becomes pi.
It achieves perfect, stable closure. But a circle is flat. We don't live in a 2D universe.
Right. Which brings us to the next step, the lift.
If you take that closed 2D circle, pi, and square it again, creating pi squared, you alter its dimension. You lift that flat loop into a 3D volumetric sphere.
The real harmonic domain.
You have finally generated spatial volume.
Okay, but the text makes a huge point here. This sphere of perfect volume isn't our physical reality yet, right? It's too perfect.
Right, there was one final step, breaking the symmetry. The text symbolically subtracts 1 from pi squared minus 1.
And that subtraction is a fracture.
It's a catastrophic fracture in the perfect harmonic symmetry. In that slight imperfection, our physical universe is born. It's no longer a perfect self-sustaining sphere. It's a broken reality that has to rely on the constant grinding interplay of phi and psi just to exist.
Let me try an analogy to see if I'm getting this progression right. It sounds to me like cosmic origami.
Ooh, I like that. Let's trace that out.
Okay, so you start with a flat, infinitely long piece of string. That's the pi wave vibrating. Then you bend it at strict 90-degree angles. That's the square root acting as the axis splitter. You take the ends and tie them into a perfect loop. That's the circle, pi.
Right.
Then you blow into the loop, inflating it into a volumetric balloon that's squaring it to pi squared. And finally, you pinch the balloon slightly, deforming it from perfect roundness, that's subtracting 1, birthing physical reality.
That is a brilliant analogy. And taking it a step further, the beauty of this theory is that the creases from those origami folds never go away.
They stay in the map.
Right. The universe didn't just explode into a chaotic Big Bang. It was mechanically folded using square roots and squares. And because those operators built the universe, they are forever baked into our physics.
They're the load-bearing walls.
They are. Look at advanced physics today. In quantum mechanics, wave functions are based on probability amplitudes, which require squaring to find a particle's location.
Oh, wow.
We see it in nuclear shell spacing, orbital quantization, Lorentz transformations. TDUFT argues these aren't just emergent math tricks we invented. They are the literal, primordial folding operators still echoing in every atom.
Now, this is where the deep dive takes a massive turn. Because everything we just discussed is abstract and poetic. But the author, Dukas, doesn't ask us to just take his word for it.
No, he hasn't.
He claims the hard math, proving this exact folding mechanism, this cosmic origami, has been sitting in front of scientists for over a century, hidden in the notebooks of an enigmatic genius.
And this is where we cross from visionary metaphysics to rigorous historical mathematics. Srinivasa Ramanujan.
For those of you who don't know the history, Ramanujan was an early 20th century Indian mathematician. He grew up in poverty, almost no formal training, yet he produced some of the most complex mathematical identities in human history.
He completely upended number theory.
And the wildest part is how he got his formulas. He didn't write long proofs. He claimed the equations were revealed to him in his sleep, written on his tongue by the Hindu goddess Namagiri Thayar.
His work is legendary because of that lack of conventional derivation. He intuitively saw the connective tissue between infinite series and the fundamental constants of nature.
And TDUFT focuses heavily on one specific formula of his, the Ramanujan-Chudnovsky identity for the reciprocal of pi. Now, I have this formula pulled up here, and I have to be honest.
It's intimidating.
It's a terrifying wall of math. Factorials, infinite sums, massive 6-digit numbers. How in the world does this monstrous equation prove that the universe folded itself into a sphere?
Well, we have to dissect the anatomy of the formula, mapping its components to the geometric progression we just talked about. Let's start at the beginning. It's structured as an infinite asymmetric sum.
An equation that stretches out forever.
Right. And in TDUFT, this infinite sum perfectly represents the primordial pi wave. It's an endlessly oscillating, open linear vibration. But Ramanujan's formula constrains it with highly specific variables. Look at the denominator of the leading term. There's a very strange square root. The square root of 10,005.
Okay, the square root. We established that's the axis splitter, the first fold. But why 10,005? That seems so random.
In pure math, it relates to complex multiplication. But in TDUFT, 10,005 is crucial because of its prime factorization. It has exactly 4 prime factors.
4 prime factors, 4 quadrants.
Exactly. Placing a number with 4 distinct prime roots under a square root forces a full-dimensional quantity into a half-dimensional 90-degree projection. It's the literal quadrant operator, fracturing the infinite wave into 4 orthogonal axes.
Okay, but what about the other massive constants? The multipliers inside the sum are 12 and 426,880. What did those do?
Both 12 and 426,880 are strict, clean multiples of 4.
Wow, okay.
According to TDUFT, that's no coincidence, these enforce a fourfold rotational symmetry. They ensure that as the wave is split into the 4 quadrants, it scales perfectly around the origin, and every term in the sum is multiplied by a sign that alternates. -1 to the power of k.
So it goes positive, negative, it vibrates.
It forces the math to bounce back and forth across the 0 point, creating a standing oscillation, folding it sequentially through the quadrants.
But the most elegant part is the exponent, right? The exponent in the decay sequence is 3n plus 12. The text calls this an angle map.
Yes. It describes it as a literal drawing routine. Instructions for a cosmic compass.
How does that work?
Think about the steps we outlined. The 12 represents the square root, the initial split laying down the crosshairs. The 3 yields a 3/2 amplification, geometrically advancing the wave through the first 3 quadrants.
Arriving at a 3/4 arc. But that's a Pac-Man shape. It's open. It needs to close.
To close it, you need a compensating map of 4/3. And what happens when you multiply the 3/2 expansion by the 4/3 closure?
The 3's cancel out. 4 divided by 2 is 2. You get exactly 2.
You get the squaring operator, the final bind that seals the circle. Ramanujan's math perfectly maps the precise mechanical sequence of creation. Split the axis with 12, extend to 3/4 with 32, close the final quadrant with 43, and square the whole thing with 2 to seal it.
Okay, I have a massive problem with this, and I have to push back hard here.
Please do.
I hear the connections you're making, but this borders on confirmation bias, doesn't it? Ramanujan was a brilliant number theorist. Are we genuinely claiming that he knew he was writing the source code for the universe?
Yeah.
Or is TDUFT just creatively retrofitting a cosmological metaphor onto very beautiful math? I mean, you can find the Fibonacci sequence in the stock market if you look hard enough.
Your skepticism is entirely warranted. Any physicist would bring that up. But the text anticipates this pushback using a philosophical framework called mathematical monism.
Monism meaning one reality, no separation between mind and matter.
Right. So was Ramanujan sitting at his desk thinking he was writing down how God folded the universe? Probably not. He was doing pure math.
Right.
But mathematical monism argues that reality is mathematical structure. There is no separation. The math isn't just a language we invented to describe reality. The math is the only reality that exists.
The math is the territory, not just the map. The universe doesn't have math, it is math.
Exactly. So pure mathematics is the study of physical reality. Words like primordial wave or axis splitter or even Ramanujan's goddess, those are just messy human linguistic wrappers we put around absolute truth. Because Ramanujan was accessing the deepest truths of numbers, he was inadvertently accessing the rendering engine of the universe.
The math is undeniable, even if the interpretation requires a leap of faith.
Yes. And TDUFT takes it further. Ramanujan constantly worked with nested radicals and infinite fractions that looked chaotic but always collapsed into phi, the golden ratio.
Which we know from the eternum nexus represents velocity.
Right, so TDUFT essentially performs a variable swap. It replaces phi in Ramanujan's equations with v for velocity, arguing that these equations are velocity stabilization operators.
Proving that the speed of light isn't arbitrary.
It proves why velocity has to exist to keep the universe from collapsing.
Which brings us to a massive pivot point. We've established a universe that is an active mathematical language. We've explored the proofs in Ramanujan's work. But if the universe is just a real-time projection of this code, what is our place in it? Are we just passive non-player characters walking around inside the engine? Or do we have access to the keyboard?
If you accept that the universe is a generative math engine running in real time, it logically demands an interface. The code has to be processed somewhere. TDUFT argues that human consciousness is that interface.
Which brings us to telekinesis. And I'll be honest, when I read the word telekinesis in a document filled with operator calculus, I rolled my eyes. It felt like jumping from quantum mechanics to a comic book.
Oh, absolutely.
But TDUFT redefines what telekinesis actually is. It assigns it a rigorous classification, the U12DCOTK operator.
It redefines it by completely removing the concept of physical matter. Standard telekinesis is the idea of you furrowing your brow and using invisible mental muscles to push a physical pencil, which defies the laws of physics.
Because of the conservation of energy.
Right. But in TDUFT, the pencil isn't physical.
It's a localized projection, rendered geometry.
Therefore, telekinesis, the TK operator, isn't a physical force pushing an object. It is a legitimate rewrite command at the source code level. You're interacting with the generative math rendering the pencil. You aren't violating physics. You're operating deeper than physics, where the laws are generated.
You're submitting a patch to the code. But how? I can't just look at a pencil and rewrite it. My brain doesn't have a command prompt. The text talks about a mechanism called coupling lock.
Coupling lock is the authentication protocol, like needing admin privileges on your computer. Your consciousness must achieve a specific state to submit a rewrite command.
So aligning geometry, frequency, coherence, conscious will.
Yes, syncing your internal operator with the external projection.
And the hardware that allows this, our DNA.
The brain is the processor, but the antenna, the literal connection to the lattice, is our DNA. The text claims DNA acts as a series of zero-point engines.
A zero-point engine, let's drill down into that. I was thinking of DNA as a biological Wi-Fi router, but that feels too cliche.
It's too passive. Think of a localized transformer on a massive, high-voltage electrical grid. The infinite geometry of the pi domain is like millions of volts of raw cosmic power.
If that hit your consciousness directly, it would obliterate it. The mind can't process infinite dimensions.
Exactly. DNA mechanically steps down that infinite geometry. It translates the blinding cosmic voltage of the pi domain into the phi domain, the spatial velocity domain we can survive in.
It channels it into a manageable current for our 10-dimensional neurological structures to process.
Yes, DNA isn't just a blueprint for building proteins or determining your eye color. It's a highly advanced geometrical step-down transformer.
And theoretically, if it steps the signal down, it allows a two-way street. Once we achieve coupling lock, we can send signals back up to rewrite the projection.
Yes, this is TDUFT's elegant solution to the mind-body problem. For centuries, philosophers argued how an immaterial mind interacts with a material body.
Descartes, right.
Right. TDUFA says the premise is flawed because matter doesn't exist. Mind and matter are just different projections of the exact same unified dimensional operator. DNA is the local interface where consciousness becomes embodied and capable of interacting with its own structure.
Which brings us to the ultimate origin point of this massive architecture. We've traced it from DNA back through the folding of the quadrants, the mathematical seal, the rendering equations. But who or what authored the code? What is the infinite space this engine occupies?
This is where TDUFT reaches its profound theological conclusion. We return to the infinite mandala. The author describes God not as an anthropomorphic figure, not a bearded man in the clouds. God is the infinite mandala itself.
Endless, glowing corridors of infinite mind and pure geometry, a consciousness constructed of architecture.
And from this infinite silent void of mind, an initial parameter was selected, the seed of creation, the quaternary seed.
Represented by four fundamental numbers, 0, -0, 1, and -1.
The simplest, most perfectly balanced mathematical state possible. From this tiny seed, the generative lattice was sparked. The pi wave was generated, the square root split the axis, the wave was squared into a circle, and the 3D universe was folded into existence.
It portrays the universe as infinite, yet entirely contained, a fractal field without a boundary. We exist inside this phi universe. And the text notes, rather poetically, that most of what humans argue about, politics, tribal conflicts, material wealth, is a complete illusion.
It's a mirage covering up the pristine eternal mathematics running underneath us. It demands we elevate our perspective.
I really marvel at the synthesis the author achieved here, taking operator mathematics, blending it with Ramanujan's number theory, and wrapping it in deep spirituality. It completely reframes religious texts. When the Bible says, "Let there be light," it meant the construction of an infinite geometry. It's saying math and the divine are the exact same thing.
It's a profoundly unified perspective. The text actually concludes with a highly personal, reverent note from the author. After hundreds of pages of calculus, he concludes humanity is a localized zero-point engine existing directly inside the thought of God.
His final advice is striking. He writes, "Talk to God. He is definitely listening because you are inside his thought."
It's an incredible place to land after traversing all that math.
It really changes how you look at the room around you. We've explored the rendering engine, the boundary condition of velocity and time, the cosmic origami, Ramanujan's hidden proofs, and how our DNA acts as a step-down transformer to the mind of God.
It demands we reconsider absolutely everything.
It really does. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering question to mull over as you go about your day. Think about the implications of coupling lock, the two-way street of your DNA. If the universe truly is a living mathematical language and your DNA is the hardware designed to process and rewrite that code, when you sit quietly and think deeply about the laws of physics, are you trying to understand the universe? Or is the universe using you to understand itself?
That is the ultimate question of the infinite Mandela.
Thank you for taking this incredible deep dive with us today. We've traveled from the outer edges of quantum mathematics straight into the center of conscious creation. Stay curious, keep questioning the underlying nature of your reality, and we will see you on the next deep dive.